All right, this is going to be the video for lesson 8-6. And so at the very beginning here, just a review, keep in mind that you're able to check all of your answers by foiling, okay? So just keep in mind that we're going to go ahead and multiply and get 6x squared plus 10x minus 3x minus 5. Now, the difference between what we are doing and kind of where we're moving into is what they're going to do now is they're actually going to put the middle together, okay? And so that's going to be 6x squared plus 7x minus 5. But the difference here is we're now going to see that we've got a number out front. And what we're going to have to do is figure out how do we go from this guy back up to this guy. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at our first example here on number 1. Okay? So now the first thing I want you to look for is signs. So it's nice and easy. If it's all positives, then we know that we've got positives, right? We know that our signs will be a positive, positive. Okay? So now, because of this number out front, we're going to add in one extra step. So the last time, in the last lesson, we learned about trinomials when they had a 1 in front. And now we're going to have a 7 in front, okay? So the first step doesn't change. You're still going to make a list of factors of 4. Now, obviously, we're not going to find factors of 4 that are going to get us to the 29 in the middle. That's where that 7 out front comes into play. So we're also going to now make a list of our factors out front. Okay, now when I'm working on these, what we're going to think about and really, really focus on is way back up here. We are going to pay special attention to the middle section of FOIL. Okay, so right, first, outer, inner, last. So we're going to pay attention to the outer. So let's think about what that means up here. Outer, the 2 outside numbers, so the 2x and the 5, and the inner, the -1 and the 3x, or the insides. And that's what we're really going to pay special attention to. Okay, so when I'm coming down here and looking at this, all right, I am going to multiply my outsides, okay? So I'm going to take 1 times 4 and get 4, and I'm going to take 7 times 1 and get 7. Okay, so outside, insides. And what I'm looking here is, do these guys add up to 29? Well, obviously the answer is no. So that's not going to work, okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and we're going to try the next one now. Okay, so now I'm going to go work with the 2, 2. So I'm going to take 1 times 2 and get 2. And I'm going to take 7 times 2 and get 14. Okay, so now I'm looking, do these add up to 29? And unfortunately, the answer is no. All right, so that's not an option. So I'm going to delete all that. Okay, now when that happens, what we have to do is we have to go ahead and rewrite one column or one set. So I'm picking this one because there was one guy, but in this case, you would flip it and become 4, 1. And technically, you're flipping 2, 2, but we know 2, 2 is just going to be the same thing. Okay, and then you're trying again. Outside, insides. Okay, so now I'm going to take the 1 times the 4, and I get 28. And I'm going to take the 1 times the 1 and get 1. So now if I'm looking at 1 and 28, yay, that gets me a 29. So my factors are 7, 1, and 1, 4. Those are the numbers that I know I need to use, okay? So when I write this down, just like difference of squares and everything else that we've done here, your first numbers go in the front. So this is going to be a 7x and a 1x. Now keep that order, okay? The order is important. Don't flip-flop that 1 and 7. It's 7 and 1. Now we already know our signs are all positives, okay? And now I'm going to be looking at the 1, 4. Again, keep it in order. 1, 4. Okay? So, again, I don't know, kind of maybe put a note here or two for you. These are your front numbers in the parentheses, okay? And these are back numbers in the parentheses set, okay? So back is right there. Front would be on the front side, okay? All right, so now if all else fails, guys, throw some numbers, just throw some numbers down in here. I mean, you know that it's got to be some combo with a 7 and a 1. You know it's some combo with a 1 and a 4. Put some numbers down, and we are going to now have to check. Checking is no longer going to be optional, okay? And you'll see why here in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and check, and I'm going to get 7x squared plus 28x plus 1x plus 4. So now, does that give me a 29? Yes, it does. So this right here is your answer, okay? Now, in reality, guys, you guys can just guess and check and throw numbers in until you find something that works. So all of this craziness that's going on right here, this is just me trying to help you dial it down a little bit, because what happens when we do get bigger numbers like 200 or 60 and we have all these factors, okay? What do? Because right now 7 and 4, there are not a lot of factors there, okay? So again, we're going to focus on the outsides and the insides, okay? All right, let's go to the next one. Let's try this one. Okay, again, there is no GCF, right? We're always looking for a GCF. There's no GCF. So we go ahead and start our list. 1 times 5, 1 times 6, and 2 times 3. Again, it's all positive, so we keep it all positive. Okay, so now look at your outside numbers. Okay, and guys, I'm drawing these little hoops so that you can kind of see. You can do that in your head. You don't actually have to write all this out. But I went ahead and show you outside is 1 times 6, and we get 6. And then I've got 5 times 1 is 5. That does not get me to 13. Okay, so now I'm going to delete all that, and I'm going to go to the next one. 1 times 3 is 3. And 5 times 2 is 10. Yay, that's going to get me 13. So when I look here, these are my options. Okay. Now, again, the nice thing is we already know it's all addition, so we don't have to worry about the signs. We'll have to talk about the signs a little bit more here in just a little bit. Now, again, these are your front numbers, right? And so when I'm talking front, this is what I'm talking about, front numbers. So I've got a 1x and a 5x. Okay, these guys are your back numbers. So I've got a 2, now be careful there, make sure you put the y in there, a 2y and a 3y. And guys, I can't tell you enough, order, whatever order you get here is the order it goes here. So if you have a 1-5 combo, you have a 1-5 combo down here. Same thing here, 2-3 combo, 2-3 combo. Keep that order. Okay, so then again, we have to check now just to make sure that everything looks good. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do our check. And I'm going to go ahead and FOIL and get 5x squared plus 3y, xy. I forgot my x. There should be an x in there. xy. And then plus 10xy and plus 6y squared. So now again, in the middle, does that give me the 13 all the way back up here? Yes, it does. So right here is your answer. Okay. All right, let's try the next one. Okay, so now we have to start talking about signs just a touch more here. Now we know that if this is a positive, it's either got to be a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. If we have a negative in the middle, we're using a negative-negative combination. Okay. All right, so we've got our list going. 1 times 3, 1 times 20, 2 times 10, and then 4 times 5. Okay, so again, we're going to start our outside inside until we find something that works. So I'm going to take the 1 times 20 and get 20, and the 3 times 1 and get 3. And so some of you are probably thinking, well, yeah, 20 minus 3 is 17. This is going to work. The problem is both of our signs, we know from earlier that both of our signs have to be negative. Okay, let's go back to basic junior high rules of adding and subtracting negative numbers. If they're the same sign, you've got to add. So when we come back down here and look at this 3 and 20 combo, that is not going to work. That is no good, okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and erase this best I can. Oh, it won't let me erase that one. All right, well, I'm going to change colors. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the next one. Okay, so I'm going to take the 1 times the 10. I'm going to be in green. I know it's going to get a little confusing. I'm sorry, guys. So the 1 times 10 is 10. And then the 3 times 2 is 6. Well, 10 and 6 don't work, so I'm going to get rid of those guys. Okay, and I go to the next one. The 1 times 5 is 5. The 3 times the 4 is 12. Now, would 12 and 5 give me 1? Absolutely. So I think my combo here should be a 1, 3, and a 4, 5 combo, okay? Now, again, if you were a person who would have tried this, it's fine. You would have foiled it out and found out that it didn't work. When it doesn't work, you have to go back to the drawing board and look for another option, okay? So just keep in mind, if it doesn't check out, it's okay. Let's go back and relook at your numbers, okay? All right, but since we found something that works here in the green, we're going to stick with our green right now. So I got my parentheses. I already know it's a negative, negative. Okay, and again, these are your front numbers, so you got a 1x and 3x. Your back numbers are 4 and 5. Okay, now do a quick check. So 1x times 3x is 3x squared. 1x times negative 5 is negative 5x. Negative 4 times negative 3 is negative 12x. And then negative 4 times negative 5 is positive 20. So does that get me back up here? Yes, it does. So this right here is your answer. Okay? All right, now on this one, got to pull a GCF. So we're starting to see that kind of pop back in again, okay? So in this case, I'm going to pull out a 5 first. So I'm going to get 2y squared minus 7y plus 6. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and start my list. Okay, so 1 times 2, 1 times 6, and 2 times 3. Now, let's pay attention to our options here as far as signs go. So our sign's either a positive, positive, or a negative, negative. Well, it's going to have to be a negative, negative, get to the middle. Same sign, we add up. So we're looking for something that adds to 7. Okay? All right, so I'm going to start my 1 times 6 and get 6. 2 times 1 is 8, or how about 2? So that's no good. That's not going to work. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, try the next one now. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 2 is 4. Yep, that looks like it's going to work. Okay, so 5 stays out front. Okay, your options or the combinations that we found a 1, 2. So 1y, 2y. And then I have minuses in the middle. And then 2, 3 on the back side there. Okay. All right, and again, you can always FOIL it out. So when I take this times this, I get 2y squared minus 3y minus 4y and then plus 6. Now in this case, I'm okay if you just kind of go back to here after we pulled the GCF and just make sure that it looks good. If you want to then go ahead and push that 5 through, like multiply by 5, and then come up and make sure you get all the way back to here, that is fine. But what I'm really looking for is just, can we get back up to that red section? And so, oh, I didn't. So all of this right here will be your answer. Okay. All right, let's go to the next page here. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull out a GCF. So I'm going to pull out a 3. And I'm going to get p squared plus 5pr plus 6r squared. Now, take note on this one. This guy has a 1 out front. So that means we don't have to worry about making a list of 1s because 1 times 1 is not going to change anything. So what we're looking for is a combination back here, right? Factors of this that add to this, just like in the last section. All right. Unfortunately, oh, that's not true. I did find something that works. If I look here, I've got a 2 and 3, right? That's going to get me a 5. So I've got 3 out front. P squared breaks down to P and P. They're all positives. And 2R and 3R. And that's my answer. So, man, that GCF was huge here because it saved us from having to make a big list, right? So make sure you always pull your GCF out first. And, man, when you get a 1 there, yay, because you only got to do factors of the 6 to get the 5. Okay, so now on this one here, we've got to pay attention to the signs. Okay, so this one is a positive and a negative. All right, that's the only way to get a -9. Now let's think about that. Back from junior high, if you have different signs, you are going to be subtracting to get that -3. Okay, so I'm going to take a 1 times 2, a 1 times 9, and a 3 times 3. Again, I'm trying to subtract to get to -3 this time. All right, so then I start my combination here. 1 times 9 is 9. 2 times 1 is 2. Probably knew right away that wasn't going to be any good. So let's go to the next one. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 3 is 6. Yeah, that can get me a 3 if I subtract them. Now, got to pay attention to the sign. I'm going to need a -6 and a +3, right? That's how we're going to end up with that -3 up top there, okay? All right, so the signs are sometimes a little iffy, but we do know our numbers, and we know where those need to go, so let's go ahead and start with that. We know that we're going to have a 1C and a 2C. On the back sides, we got our 3's. Okay, so now in this case, one's a positive, one's a negative. You can throw them down in there and check it, and if it doesn't work, you can just flip them and check it again. Another way to kind of look at it is to say, okay, we know that we need a positive 3, okay? And so start thinking about your inside, outside. So start thinking about your foiling process. So if I'm looking at my outsides, right? I mean, that's what this was right here. The outsides, that was a positive. So make them positive. On your insides, right here, here's your insides. Well, here's your insides. That needs to be negative. So when I multiply, it's a negative. Now again, if you're not 100% sure, no big deal. Let's just check it and see. So we're going to get 2c squared plus 3c minus 6c minus 9. So does this come back up in here? Yes, it does. But if you happen just to have these guys, so I mean, this is your answer, but if you happen to have a positive here and a negative here, when you FOILed that out, you would end up with a negative and a positive and find out that you get a positive 3c, and you know that will not work. So you know that you'll need to flip signs. So just keep in mind, checking is huge here because it'll help you catch your mistakes. All right, I want you to go ahead and pause the video and let's see what you can do on number 7 on your own. Okay, so when I look at number 7 here, I have got a 1 times 4, a 2 times 2, and then I've got 1 times 5. Now, did you look at your signs? So in other words, this was a positive, positive, or negative, negative. It's going to have to be a negative, negative to get to the middle. Okay? All right, so I know for sure that I'm going to have negatives on the inside. Okay, which means same sign, add. I'm going to be adding them up. All right, so now if I take the 1 times 5 and the 1 times 4, 5 and 4, that's not going to get me a 3. That's no good. Okay, now go to the next one. 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times 1 is 2. Oh dear, that doesn't work either. All right, let's get rid of that. Okay, now you have to flip a list. Remember that was part of it. If it doesn't work on the first go around, take one of them and rewrite them. Now do a double check again. Okay, 1 times 1 is 1. 5 times 4 is 20. That's no good. Okay, 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 5 is 10. And that's still no good. So no matter what I do, I cannot find a combination that will work. So in this case, it looks like to me that we're going to end up with prime. That was kind of a mean one to make you do on your own, wasn't it? So you wouldn't have found anything that worked. Okay. Don't worry about this one. We'll talk about this in the next lesson. Let's drop down here. And it's asking you to find the area, what are the possible dimensions. So remember, this is the only type of word problem you're going to have in this chapter, and it's just fancy for factor. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and pause the video, and let's try to factor this one on your own now. Okay, so there's not a lot of options here because you've got a 1 times 2 and a 1 times 7, but pay attention to your signs. If you have a negative here, that means you needed a positive-negative combination. If they are different signs, you subtract. Okay, so now I do my 1 times 7 and get 7. 2 times 1 is 2. That is no good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead then, and I'm going to flip one on my list. 2 times 7 is 14, and 1 times 1 is 1. Yep, that's going to work. All right, so I've got a 2x, I've got a 1x, I've got a 1, and a 7. Okay, so now looking back at our signs here a little bit, this is a negative 14, right? That's the only way to get a negative 13, so we need a positive 1 and a negative 14. Okay, so when I look here, negative 14. And positive 1. Insides, outsides. Again, throw in the signs, and if check it and it works, great. If not, flip them around. So this right here will be your final answer when you check it. All right, that concludes the notes for this lesson. Thanks.